Well, it's great to have you back on the show. You're such a nice guy. You probably don't have any enemies in life. It's always just great to run into you and Ronnie and different industry events. But we were talking the other day about culture and how important it is. And you just brought up some things. And I visited your company. I know you got a great culture there, but I thought you might be able to bring forth some tips for people or remind people of things that they should be doing that, as it's gotten so busy in our organizations that they kind of just take for granted or skip over, or they've delegated but never followed up on. So why don't you the people in the audience, there's probably only two that don't know you, but remind them, introduce yourself, let them know what you're doing, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So Luis Alvarez, President CEO of Alvarez Technology Group. We've been in business. We're celebrating our 21st year this year. And during that time, we've evolved from tech consultancy, VAR, then got into managed services, and now we're a managed security services provider. Although we still provide, cloud infrastructure and IoT support like most MSPs. And I think the journey to where we've gotten to and our success in that time frame really has been built on having a strong leadership team that believes in what we're each doing. You got to have a vision for what you want your company to do. Simon Sinek talks about the why. What is your why? And people used to kind of scoff at that. And now what we found is that younger people that we're looking to hire and bring on board, they want to know what your why is. I get that I'm going to be a help desk technician level 1, but why am I going to do that? What's the purpose behind it? And they don't express it that way, but when you're in the interview process, they really are compelled to ask about what is the value that they're going to add to the organization, and what's the organization going to get from, are they going to get from the organization? So it's an interesting, different set of interview questions than, back in the day when we were hiring, largely for skills. Now we're hiring a lot for culture.
It also strikes me, something you said very briefly there at the beginning, is your security focus now sounds unique, or at least different than what many IT MSPs are doing in the space. And what is that's different, and how has that affected the culture and those conversations you're having with hiring?
Well, we are very, very passionate about security. It's like built into our core mission now, and has been for probably the last 4 or 5 years. We used to, you remember the one time we were up doing I think it was a 2 or 3 day seminar with you and your team, and where you asked us, what is our mission statement? And at the time it was like, make downtime obsolete, because that was what was really important for us, right? It's like, people don't want downtime. We get that. But now, if you ask me that same question, it's to keep our clients safe, secure, and make them successful. And to really grasp what that means is that you have to have your entire team of people believing what that mission is. It can't just be you spouting out words and hoping that you convince clients that you mean what you say. But you got to have your team believing everything that you're building, and whether that's the stack of services and tools that you use to protect your clients, or their commitment to raising their hand when something goes sideways. And I'll give you a perfect example. We have this one guy that works for us, Mike. He's a great guy, relatively new cybersecurity analyst, but he's been with us for years, and we moved him over into this role because he showed real desire and real skills in that area. And we had a situation a few weeks ago where one of our clients, we were doing a project, and we discovered that the backups we had some bad backups from that particular server that was being moved. It wasn't a huge issue. It was, just one of those things that kind of delayed the project. And now we had to figure out why the backups weren't working, and then why we didn't know that they weren't working. And one of Mike's jobs was to make sure the backups worked. And so he dug into it like relentlessly to say, this cannot happen on my watch. And he apologized to me profusely and said, I discovered that some of the alerts that were in the old portal for this particular vendor didn't translate over to the new portal. And so now I don't trust them anymore. Every morning I'm going to be looking at both portals and I'm going to be doing manual checks. And I'm like, hey, Mike, that's great. I really appreciate that. And he goes, I just want you to know that I don't ever want our company to have to not be able to provide the ability to restore backup. That is not going to happen while I'm here. I want you to believe me that this is a one-time thing. And he was just passionate about convincing me that he'd made a mistake in his mind, which he didn't really. It was just the tools themselves had been faulty. But it just goes to show the passion that our team has about keeping our clients safe and, really making sure that if a disaster strikes, we can recover quickly because, a disaster will strike. Right? In our industry, if you believe that you can be immune to ransomware or you can be immune to a server crashing or whatever the piece of failure that happens, you're delusional because it is going to happen. And what you need to do as a provider of those services is figure out what's the recovery. What does that look like? And backups are a critical component of what we do. So not being able to have those backups readily available really hurt Mike. And he still, a couple of weeks later, brought it up at one of our meetings. And I said, Mike, we're good. Trust me. He goes, I just want you to know that it's just not going to happen again. So, and that's part of the culture. That's what you need to instill if you really have a culture of security.
Well, it's interesting because that relates to one of the things we teach, that you may remember in the course that you're part of the 2 or 3 day seminar. And then we have it in a ownership culture course on Habitly is the person owns their piece. But what's very interesting is, and I'd like you to talk about that, is this just Mike? Or is this part of your culture training and reinforcement that's bringing it to a new level where he's not just owning something that was his fault? Like if you and I have some type of misunderstanding, and I'll own the piece that's mine. Maybe I raised my voice. Okay. But what I said was right. Mm-hmm. Right. But at least I got to own I raised my voice and that hit you wrong and blah, blah, blah. Of course, I can't ever imagine me raising my voice at you. But, and, at least we teach people to do that. But here you got Mike. I mean, as you say, it was a problem with the tools. And he's like going back because you're so deep on teaching people ownership and taking pride in all that they deliver that he's saying, well, I guess I should have checked in this other portal, the older portal, and that's got to be my fault, even though nobody said it was his fault. So speak to me. Is it simply you just hire great people and, hey, they got it? Or you have to hire people that are good, and then you can even make those strengths stronger?
I think it's the latter. We, like a lot of companies that believe that they can train their people, and we do, training is one of the fundamental things that we emphasize throughout our employees' time with us is you got to have a cultural fit. You got to make sure that when you're talking to those people early on, whoever it is that you want to bring to the table to have that interview, that they understand what your why is, but also what your core values are, what's important to you. And, core values, a lot of people like to think of them as, something you put on a poster and hang in the kitchen and people can ignore it or not. Yeah, and it's true. In a lot of companies, that's the way it is. But for us, we live our core values. And there are so many times that we have difficult decisions to make. Today is a really good example of that. We had one of our clients who was asking us to do something that was outside of our comfort zone. And we have one of our core values is client first. And we said, okay, yeah, that's one of them. But the other one is open, honest, and direct. And we had to have a very open and honest and direct conversation with that particular client to say, this is why we're not going to do what you want us to do. It's not that it's illegal or immoral, but it's just unethical and it's wrong. And we don't feel comfortable doing it. And if that means we're going to not be your partner to provide IT services, that's your choice to make. But we just aren't going to do what you're asking us to do. And that was a collective decision that was made. We had a meeting with, the account manager, the service manager, the engineer in question, and myself. And every one of us came to the exact same conclusion. There was no dissension. There was no well, maybe this one time. It was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do this. And that unified front came from the fact that we train our people on our core values, and we train them about using those core values when you have to make tough decisions. Fall back on them. They're there to help you decide what's right and wrong. Don't do it in a vacuum. Just if you're trying to figure out, should I do this or not, or should I take this to management or not, or should I engage with a client about this or not? Look at that list of 6 core values, and if they don't help you, then nothing else will.
And when you bring that to the client, did you mention that not only this is unethical, but it violates your values?
Yes, we said one of our core values is clients first, and I will say that is important, but also for us it's open, honest, and direct. Means that I have to come to you and tell you why this is not something that we're comfortable doing. And we explained our position. Fortunately, at the end of the day, they agreed with us because there was 2 decision makers that we were meeting with, and they hadn't seen it from our point of view. They were looking at it just from an operational, hey, let's just do this and move on. We're like, here's why this is a bad idea. But if you're not comfortable having those conversations and not really, falling back on the values that are important to you as an organization, then you might just do it because, hey, they're paying you, right? So it's money. Why not do what they're going to pay you to do? But you always have to stick, to those core values because your employees understand that, right? If you bend for one client, or you bend for one employee, or you bend for one vendor, then they're going to start questioning the whole thing and say, okay, so these aren't as important as he says they are.
Well, actions speak louder than words. And so talk to me also about the client perception of your values, because, if you have the right type of client, like you do in this case, and probably all of your clients, one of the things they bought into, which doesn't sound right, but agreed with, was that they wanted to work with a company that, had these high values. Mm-hmm. And so when you bring this to them, even if they disagreed, which would be surprising under the circumstances, they still would respect the fact that you had this open, candid, transparent, whatever it is, value. But, some of the clients that might be more selfish or might not, or might have some gray areas in their ethics, might say, well, wait a minute, you say client first, and we're the client. We want this. Don't we come first? Why aren't you doing it? Sounds like you're going against your values.
And, you have to make the decision whether you want to continue to do business with that person or not. And, fortunately for us, it's the core values is embedded in our prospecting, even on the sales side of things. So if we get, somebody calls in and says, hey, I want to do business with you, but I want to do this, that, and the other. And we know that they're cutting corners, and we know that they're just looking for, a deal, or this is somebody that we're, they may not be with us for more than 6 or 7 months. We don't even want to invest our time and effort. It's just, they're more important clients to go after that fit our profile. And we've had to fire clients in the past, where they just didn't adhere to what was part of our core values. We had one customer a few years ago, for example, who, great client, other than the CEO. Everybody there was an amazing human being to work with. They were great. But the CEO, who was frequently out of town and therefore made life a little easier for the staff because she wasn't around. When she was around, though, she made everybody's life miserable. She'd call at 6 a.m. in the morning, blow and just tear away at one of my after hours texts because she made a mistake and deleted something, and it wasn't her fault, and it's somebody else's fault, and she would just go on and bash this person. And I'm paying you way too much to get this level of service. And she was paying, the company was paying us about $12,000 a month, so it wasn't inexpensive, but we were delivering the services that we were required to deliver. And finally, I just had to step in and say, I looked at my guys and they said, I don't ever want to go there again. Please don't send me to that client. And I said, well, that's it. We got to go our separate ways. So I had a meeting with the CEO. I explained that we weren't a good fit, that I would help her find somebody that she would approve of, and we could be part of that selection process. And it took her, she said, fine, that's great. But she kept on extending the process. And after about 3 months, I said, look, at the end of this month, we're done. So let's get somebody on board, because we're not going to, we're not going to stick around past the end of this month. Because she never changed her tune. She was just still as belligerent and as, caustic to us and her staff. In fact, by the time, within a couple of months of us leaving, I heard that pretty much her entire senior team left, because the company that she hired to replace us, she hired was a financial decision, right? Half our cost, but also none of our services. So they got more frustrated than they could ever have thought of, because IT now became a problem. Before, it was something that ran smoothly and we took care of it. Now it was like an issue every day. So you have to make that decision every now and then, not just with employees, but with clients and with vendors. They're all part of the ecosystem that your values work in.
Yeah, and your people that want to know that you've got their back, whether it's with a peer, who's misbehaving or whatever, or which would happen rarely if you're hiring well and managing well. But things happen. People go through tough times, and there can be something pop up. I'm curious about one thing in particular, Luis, because you mentioned that your new mission, and I forget each of the words, but it was like safe, secure, and whatever.
Successful. That's the last one.
Yeah, and this last piece is the one I want to ask you about: making the client successful. Because you know me 10 years plus, and I've been preaching that, hey, you guys got to get in there, got to be the business advisor, not the IT consultant. And that's such a struggle for a lot of people in the industry or in any business to move beyond the commodity side, even if you have like top end stuff. What are some ways that you have made your clients more successful?
So I'll give you a real world example that is a recent one. So we work with a nonprofit locally that does recovery services for drug addiction and alcoholism, and they've been clients of ours for over 15 years. I mean, one of our first clients when we first started our business, and we had a transfer of leadership twice. Which, if you're an IT company, that every time you have senior leadership move on, you kind of quake in your boots a little bit, because you don't know who's coming in and whether they have their own team that they want to bring in. I've been working with this other, service provider for years. I really want to bring them in now that I'm the new CEO for this organization. But over that 15 years, we've gotten to know them really well and have gotten to know how they operate, what motivates them, what motivates the people there. And we embrace their mission to do good and help people. And so when they recently got a bunch of money from the federal government and from the state of California to expand their operations, because unfortunately during the pandemic, a lot of people suffered through a lot of substance abuse as a way to cope. And so now these folks are trying to get back into the real world, if you will, and they need help. And so they got all this money to expand their services. And we sat down with the CEO, and we're part of the team that was making the decision. Where are we going to expand? What's the best way for us to use this funding to make the biggest impact? And I started talking to the CEO, who's become a good friend, and I talked to her about youth mental health. And this was long before it became real sexy, but this was about a year ago. And we're talking about the fact that it's not just adults that are struggling with this, but young people. And so she asked me to be part of a group of community members to help them decide how they were going to use this funding. And because I knew their mission and I knew what drove them, I was able to offer advice that let them spend that money to the best of their abilities. And they've won awards since then and have gotten even more funding because of the success that they've had. But I played a very small role, I want to believe, in helping steer them in the right direction, because I knew their business. And I think if you want to make any of your clients successful, you need to understand their business, not as much as you understand your own, but a bank is just not a bank. A law firm is just not a law firm. You need to understand what motivates the leadership of that organization and how you can help them achieve whatever goals that they have. But you need to know what those goals are. So as part of our annual, we have quarterly business reviews with our clients, the account managers do. But once a year, we have kind of a big review, the annual review, where we want to know what their mission and vision is. Has it changed since last time we talked to them? What are your core values? In some cases, they're like, we don't have any. So what's a core value? We've helped them put together that. And we know a lot of local consultants, for example, that help businesses develop those sorts of things. And we refer them. Doesn't make us any money, but it helps us make our clients better and more successful than they would have otherwise been. And we're happy to make those connections every time we can. And it's like when in the early days of the pandemic, if you remember, there was this mad scramble for how do businesses, what resources are there for businesses that can keep their doors open, to help me keep my doors open. And so we put together a group of business leaders with the local chamber and a couple of other organizations to have weekly webinars that we would host. We said, hey, we'll host these things, but let's get resources and information out there to business leaders. And we would have 2,000 or 3,000 attendees at these things because they were all like super concerned about what's my future? Is my company going to survive this? Yeah. And when the PPP loans came out, we found the local banks that were willing to take on new clients and started steering our clients, anybody else that we knew, to, hey, don't deal with Bank of America or Wells Fargo. They're not going to help you. Go to these local banks that are willing to help you out. So having that dedication to making sure that your clients are successful and survive those circumstances is what makes us feel better at night. We go to sleep knowing that we did good.
Yeah. And it all comes back to relationships. I'm reminded of two things. I've got a recent client I'm working with out of state, but they are a small multi-branch bank, and they've worked with me on our talent assessments to assess all their assistant branch managers to see who, basically based on what they know of their skill sets and behaviors, and then based on the profiles and the assessments, which ones look like the best ones to invest in, to promote. And you bring up the nonprofit where you help them with the substance abuse thing. I just saw something in the news today that Oregon's, whatever they call it, where drugs are no longer illegal in Oregon. And you have personal amount you can have. And if you're caught, you get like $100 fine. And even that can be waived. Well, their drug use is up 10 times and more across the board of all these drugs. We're talking massive amounts. And I think of, the nonprofit you're helping. And I love what you did, that you brought up separate of you brought up more mental recovery. Forgive me, I went into the drug side if that was inappropriate. But, I have a 15-year-old daughter. And the reports I get back from her and other teenagers on high school right now, and, the stay-at-home pandemic side is gone. But what's happening in the high schools and even the middle schools today with families and kids is it's a tidal wave.
It is. And it's something that we have to, as a community, beyond what we do at work, as a community, we have to come together to do what we can to help, because it's only going to impact us down the road. It's if we complain now that we don't have enough people to fill the roles that we have in our companies, imagine a world where the kids can't work because they just are so debilitated, so unable to function. It's only going to hurt us. And so we need to fix this as a community and not take the one road or the other road, but just, what are all the roads that we need to take in order to help. And one of the things that we make available to our team, we like a lot of businesses, provide benefits to our employees. And some of those are related to helping them and their families cope with things that happen in their lives, whether it's a mental health issue or substance abuse issue. We want them to know that there are resources that they can tap into, and that it's not a stigma if you come to me and say, hey, I need to take some time off because, my grandkid needs some help and my daughter can't help, and I need to, go out to wherever and spend a couple of weeks to try to get their lives back together again. We'll support that every day of the week because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it goes back to your values, goes back to the type of people you are and the people you hire. And the only thing that's going to turn this country around is for Thomas Jefferson said, we do not have a nation by the majority, but we have a nation by the majority who participate. And all it takes for tyranny to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent.
Yep.
And, that's the opposite of what you're doing. Not that you're in, it's not really a silence, but silence through inaction, and you're taking action and supporting people. And that's what people need. Mm-hmm. The trends are really scary. We talk about company culture. So I know an ER doc in Boston who says the nurses don't know how to divide 10 in half to figure out the dosage, and their bedside manners are toxic. They're so irritated with the patients and rude, and we see it. I was at a Starbucks on Sunday. I prefer to go to local coffee shops, but this one was just closer to where I was, and they closed early. And I thought, okay, well, is it okay if I sit outside? They said, yeah. So I work on my laptop. And I noticed the 4 employees that came out, the 3 young ones all parked in the parking spaces right in the front of the Starbucks. The one that was over 40, a woman, they were all women, walked behind the building where she had thoughtfully parked her car to leave for the parking spaces for the customers.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary. Very scary.
It is, and it's even with young people who are unintentionally doing things, it's our responsibility to just teach them, mentor them and show them a better way. I remember back in the day when you looked at somebody's resume, and if they change their jobs every couple of years, you're like, oh, this person's a problem child. They can't keep a job. Now it's the way it is. Right? You see a resume. One, you're happy to see a resume that you can look at, but younger people don't want to stay forever in one place, and we as business owners have to come, to grips with that and accept it, because they're looking at you as a way stop toward the future, and be happy you have them as long as you can keep them, and don't skimp on training, don't skimp on anything, because you're going to have an impact on that person's life for a long time. And one of the things that we do is we like to think of our former employees as part of our family and part of our network, and we try not to lose touch with them. And sometimes that pays dividends. I have one of my former employees who left 7 years ago to take another job, coming back starting next week, because he just said, you know what? I enjoyed doing what I did, but I really miss what we had at ATG. And I'd like to come back. And he took a pay cut to come back, because to him, it wasn't about the money. It was about all the things that he experienced working for us for as long as he was here, and having missed out on that in his new company. And so that only happened because we kept that network alive and kept people feeling like they were part of what was going on in ATG's life. And we've gotten business from it. Our employees who've gone off to work for somebody else. I have one guy that worked for us that is now a senior executive at Cisco under their Duo program. And so whenever we have any issues with Duo multi-factor authentication, we call Assam and say, hey, Assam, do you have an engineer that can help us? Absolutely. I'm going to have him call you right now. We don't call the help desk. We call Assam.
Yeah, but I want to emphasize the reason it works is because you're sincere, Luis, and you hire people that are sincere and like people. And it isn't something you can fake. No. Now, when you take that relational skills, people skills, and then you connect it with systematic learning, you connect it with employees at your company always see their future. They're not like you brought up, I'm not help desk one forever. They're like, oh yeah, I can learn this. I can learn, then I'm going to go there. Then I'm going to go there. Oh, I have this option over here. So you connect them with their future. When they leave, you probably have an offboarding process and an exit interview type of thing
Mhm.
And like, you may not remember, but one of the things, I recommend is that, when they leave, it's like, hey, can we stay in touch? But you're doing it. You didn't probably hear, I'm sure you didn't hear from me, but you do it, and you actually do stay in touch. And it's because you sincerely care.
Mhm.
And it's not to get the business. It's not to get to that help desk resource you need at Cisco. Just because you really care. So, some people get so angry when their people leave.
Yeah,
I'm like, well, remember, that person could be a reference for you.
exactly.
Why not just keep the friendship and instead say, how can I help you? I think that's great. You got an opportunity that's better for you, whether it's, career wise, money wise, whatever. And just keep the conversation going. I don't know how you keep track of all the people, Luis, because you're like a magnet. You probably have thousands in your network. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's, in 21 years, we've had a lot of people come through our doors and move on. But I would say that the vast majority of them, we have great relationships with. It's not, to your point, a quid pro quo. It's just, we want to know what's going on in their lives. We want to celebrate when they have, they were young whippersnappers when they worked with us, and now they're married and have kids and, dealing with college issues. And I see them at the coffee shop, and I'm like, hey, how's it going, John? How's the kid and the golf practice? Oh my God, he's got a scholarship. Oh, that's great. It's, you want to be able to keep those relationships going, because we're all interconnected, and we got to stay interconnected. The worst thing we can do is, pull ourselves away from society, pull ourselves away from the things that are both good and bad, because that's what makes us a strong nation. To your point, what makes America great is the fact that we can come together when we need to, and we can overcome obstacles, and we can work together in small communities and large to accomplish big things. And we can't forget that, because that will be a really bad thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Luis, it's going to be in the notes, but if anybody wants to talk to you about what you're doing with culture or otherwise, at Alvarez Technology Group, what's the best way to visit your website or see you?
Yeah, visit our website. You can, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. Email me. My email address is in my LinkedIn profile, and I'm happy to answer any questions and have any conversations around culture and building a business. I'm passionate about helping others achieve success and greatness, because, as you know, I always say, a rising tide lifts all boats. So if my competitors get better, then we all benefit from it. And I attend a lot of conferences that I speak at, and I'm happy to share all those little elements of success, because they're unique to me. But if I can help somebody else, kind of get a spark or get an idea that's going to germinate into something really, really positive for their organization, I'm happy for that.
Fabulous. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Always love talking with you.
My pleasure, my friend. Take care.